Methodist Church are packed and ready for the Russians. A Russian cargo plane arrives at Barksdale tomorrow to take away 80 tons of donated food and medical supplies. Most of it came from local churches and civic groups, but others donated as well.
And I'm Dr. Lydia Istomina. I'm the host of this podcast, and today I'm excited to host our wonderful friends, James Gillespie, Larry Hiller, and David Hochstetler. Hello, guys. How are you?
Good. Nice to see you.
Hello.
I can't even express how much I'm happy to see you today and host you, because we are friends for like 30 plus years. And we had so many things happened, and all these exciting things with your traveling to Russia, and also all the things you've done here to support that mission. Briefly about our podcast, Tangled Time, History's Hidden Threads, is a beautiful podcast to help people who love history and who love mysteries and who want to understand what truly happened in our history. And that is important because it brings people together. It helps us to see the facts and what was the motivation for certain things and what was happening on the background, right? So when we hear the story about this biggest Russian military cargo airplane, AN-124, also aka Ruslan, we just like, what does it have to do with this podcast? And what do this handsome young men do in your studio? What is the relation to that story? So here is the secret. James Gillespie and Larry Hiller and David Hochstetler flew with that airplane to Russia back in 1992. So please, James, Larry, and David, introduce yourself first.
I'm James Gillespie, and at that time I was principal of an elementary school, George P. Hendricks Elementary School in Shreveport, Louisiana. And we were all members of Broadmoor United Methodist Church. And I was invited to go on the plane by Reverend Dwight Ramsey, and my connection was that his wife was a teacher at my school, and so I wanted to go on the trip and go on the flight. I had kind of a little bit of leverage with Dwight's wife, and that she was a teacher in my school. And I said, if you want to keep teaching in my school, you need to let me go on this plane. So she used her I used her as a connection to be able to go on the trip.
You see the mystery. I always thought, like, wow, did you get selected? Good for you. You had the leverage. That's quite a story already. So how about you, Larry? How did you get on that plane?
I got selected because I was a doctor and they needed some medical equipment in Russia with the food. And I helped obtain some of that and decided to go. Dwight asked me to go with them on the plane to take the equipment over.
And yes, and that was important. We will talk more about that. David, how did you get on that military plane? You are a general or you are a pilot? What is that secret?
I was invited by Reverend Dwight Ramsey as well. I was director of a hospital facility. So I came from a healthcare background and knew about some equipment and how to set it up. And also I was interested in his enthusiasm about getting food over to the people in Russia. I remember him saying, you can't tell them about Christ if their stomachs are grumbling so much because they're so hungry. So we need to get some food over there for their bellies and we need to get some medical supplies to show our compassion.
I was going to add one other thing if I could. One of our reasons was going to document that the food was distributed, that the food boxes that were sent, that they got to the people. That was one of our purposes in going. And so I somehow wound up at Channel 12, the CBS affiliate in Shreveport, with a legend here in Shreveport, Bob Griffin. And he showed me how to operate one of their cameras. Now, to somebody that was really a novice with photography and video cameras, that was really an experience for me to begin with, to think that I was going all the way around the world to video this historic event.
So let's talk a little about the problem of hunger. I'm afraid it's harder for people who will follow us and view us to believe that it was hunger. People here have so much abundance of food. And why suddenly you load a plane with food for Russia, and which is a former Soviet Union? So let's spend a little time on talking about hunger in Russia. How much did you know at that time when you were ready to board that plane about hunger?
Yeah, I did not know what was going on in Russia as far as hunger is concerned. I just remember getting there and seeing, in 1991 when I went, I remember getting there and seeing the lines of people. There would be a store, not like a grocery store or supermarket in the United States where everything was in one store, but there would be like a butter store and a milk store and a meat store. And there were lines of people around the block waiting to be able to go into the store. And it was such a surprise to me that existed. And so I'm sure Dwight realized that was one of the things that needed to be taken care of before we could even preach. You needed to meet that need first.
And that's what I invited you to be our guest, because I personally grew up in the Soviet Union. I grew up with my sister playing in those lines for 3-4 hours. We were children. And I remember the line, especially to get flour. We had numbers written with a chemical pencil that you cannot remove, that shows your number. And of course, adults were kind to us. They will allow us to step out of the line and play, and then they will take us in. But that was a tough time. But becoming an adult, that scarcity mentality never changed. And so before we started the church, I remember how I will come to our refrigerator in the house, and I have 2 children, and I will open it, and it's nothing. And I will close it just to come back like 20 minutes later and open it again. And I thought, what are you doing? It's like by a miracle, something will show up there. Luckily, my mom was so resourceful. And so she would always rescue us, sending us maybe some chicken or butter. But you're right. Every store, bread store, milk store had separate lines. And you had to go from one to another. So yes, hunger was bad. And that's why when Dwight was asked by my church to help us with food, I remember that day, it was 1991, the fall. And I'm not sure that you're aware of this story. My problem was I didn't know how to say no. And so I called Dwight and I said, people are hungry. I mean, we have a very bad situation on the market. Black market was prospering, but people could not buy anything. And you're right, James, because you got on that plane to actually escort the airplane that it will not land in Moscow, remember?
Right.
Because if it landed in Moscow, Moscow was so corrupt that all the humanitarian aid practically went to the black market at that time. So Dwight requested that the plane will fly to Yekaterinburg. But before that, when I called, he says, yes, I have plenty of food, but I need an airplane. And it's like, what, I'm a pilot, I'm a general. But again, I could not say no, did not know how. Had to think hard, and I started asking people around how to get to Moscow and how to get an airplane. And I will talk about it later. But so let's continue now with the plane that we already received. Tell me your side of the story. What happened there? How did you learn about suddenly this military airplane coming to Shreveport?
I don't remember how I first knew about it. It just happened, and that's when I started making my request to be able to accompany to accompany the food and the medical supplies. David, how did you find out about it?
Again, I don't remember the details, but it was a miracle in itself. The place that this Russian airplane landed is what is referred to as SAC Air Force Base, being a strategic Air Force command center. Maybe God had a plan for this whole adventure that we didn't know about, and a lot of things we just had to accept by faith. We really didn't know what to expect. I had no idea about the hunger conditions in Russia. It was only after I got there that I was able to see and understand what was going on. One of my memories, though, is that one of the things that I saw of the Russian people so appreciative of the food that we received, but in turn, they wanted to give us things as well. Mm-hmm. And it occurred to me at one time when we were invited to a family's home for a meal that they were sacrificing a great deal of their food just to give us a meal with them.
I remember there was a lot of planning that went from the United States side. There were senators involved. The State Department of the United States was involved. There were a lot of letters and faxes that were exchanged. It didn't happen overnight, but it did happen, and there was a lot of strategies that took place to make it happen.
I remember Jim McCreary was our congressman, and he obtained fuel for the plane through NATO because it cost something like $140,000 just to fill the plane.
Mm-hmm. And it's very true. I'm glad you mentioned it. First of all, thank you for mentioning how many organizations were involved in planning the flight on both sides.
Right.
On the American side and Russian, because it was a military airplane, first time crossing the border of the United States. And also another thing attached to that was, as I remember, it was Pentagon engaged. Mm-hmm. Because again, it's a military airplane, and so maybe you know more about that. But yes, Larry, thank you for mentioning what you just said, because so many people were engaged, but also when the airplane landed, the food, it was not just from the Methodist Church. It was from, of course, United Methodist Committee on Relief, that is Methodist, but I know that Baptist Church participated. Tell me more about that.
There were organizations throughout Northwest Louisiana. In fact, Louisiana, Florida, Texas, it was from throughout the United States that participated. So it wasn't just Louisiana, it wasn't just United Methodist. It was from a lot of different organizations that made the contributions of the food boxes. And we'll talk about this later, but within the food boxes, it was so neat so inspiring, I should say, to read the messages that the people had written that had contributed for the food boxes. So.
Thank you. Yes, that was one of the most touching things. In addition to the food that people did not even see for a long time. Mm-hmm. And one of them was canned meat, mm-hmm. and canned tuna. Sugar was given to us only by coupons, mm-hmm. a certain number of pounds a year. Also, like I remember chocolate. That was so much joy, not only among children, but even adults. Because people were deficient of energy, and you as medical professionals know. But also the flour, remember that I mentioned in the beginning. So that was such a joy, but the letters that were practically in every box. And when people were opening them, as I know, quite a few families established connection. Wow. And started corresponding, thanking their American friends and thanking the back and forth. And I know that even a few visits happen after that. So I think that's what you started, a bridge. We called it a bridge of love. But also, did you know that when you landed and you got out of the airplane, we called you our astronauts?
I didn't know that.
For us, it was unbelievable. Honestly, either it was lost in communication or maybe Dwight never told us. We had no idea that there are 5 people on the board of that plane. And so when you started popping out, they just like astronauts, they came from the sky. But also, how comfortable was it for you inside of that military plane?
Not.
Yeah, it was so loud.
Oh, loud. Oh, I didn't think of that. So say more.
We were behind 4 huge engines
Oh,
in the very back of the plane. It was loud. You couldn't talk.
No, you couldn't talk, and we had earplugs. Did you use earplugs, David?
I brought a little radio with earbuds, and I couldn't hear it. I turned the radio full volume and could not hear a thing. So it was not comfortable at all.
No, and there were not like seats on an airplane. They were like park benches with the backs against each other. Long
So-
went the length of the plane, or a long way. And
so you're saying that it was no first class for you?
there was no first class.
You could not recline?
Not even economy. It was not good.
Let me show you the picture that Larry Hiller, thank you for sending me this picture. Here it is.
And I don't know if you can see the benches we were sitting on.
In the center, the benches are back to back,
Yeah.
and on each side, there were slings. This was a military transport area. And so soldiers would either sit on the benches or in those seats to the left and right. And again, the noise was just unbelievable to make signs and kind of do hand signals.
This location where you are talking to Russian actually pilots, right? Am I right?
Right.
But so what I see on this picture, I will show you the pallets. So where did you sit? Where was that part in the on the plane where you actually could sit, maybe listening to your radio?
We were above this cabin area where the food was. We were above that, and we had to climb a ladder and stay in a separate room from where this food was.
What was most impressing for you when you first entered the plane?
Depressing or impressing?
Yeah,
Impressive, yeah, impressive. Depressing too.
Yeah.
The size of the plane, I agree with what Larry was saying. And the size, and we had to step over things to get where we were going. It wasn't just you walk on it and you walk on a level area. You had to kind of step around cables and step around boxes to get where we were going.
And do you remember how many tons it could deliver?
We had 80 tons. We had 80 tons of food and 20 tons of medical supplies, and the plane was half full.
I think it was like the second largest plane in the world. That's what I'd heard.
It is, yes, it is the second largest plane. That's very true. And also, the capacity of this plane is 150 tons. So you're kind of very getting close, right? And the funniest thing was that when we talked to the government, and I will show you the picture of our negotiations with the First Lady of Russia, Naina Yeltsina, who hosted that in the old part of Kremlin. And Larry Hiller was there. So the agreement was that everything is free. The plane is free. The refueling is free. And so the funniest story about this that I want to reveal today is when everything was unloaded. You are in my hometown. Some of you were hosted by our church members, right? That's what David shared. But so the funny story related to the fuel. We were just so happy that the airplane landed. You are alive. Our astronauts are with us. I received a call from the Ministry of Justice. And so they said, please check your fax machine. You are getting an invoice.
Uh-oh.
Did you hear that story?
No,
Okay, so I'm getting the facts and my hair just like because it was the cost of the fuel.
oh my goodness.
It was like $1,500 when we converted. And I just sat and I did not know what should I cry or I'm losing my mind. What should I do? So Lena Tishenko immediately exclaimed, because at that time my house was like an office, like a headquarters. And she actually slept in our house. And she just simply said, oh, let the patriarch pay for that. And I said, you're insane. That's a Methodist church that organized it. So fast forward, I called Naina Yeltsina. And next moment, we got a fax 0.
Wow.
So it was waved off. But that was quite a scare. So let's continue with your side. So that's what I thought. It will be interesting to compare notes. So here you are inside of the plane, and you are actually with your ideological enemies.
That's correct.
In the same space for how many hours?
Oh, it took 8 hours from Barksdale to Alaska, and we had refuel there, and then 8 more hours to a Russian base just north of China, and then 8 hours to Yekaterinburg.
Right.
So
and it was hard to talk because it was so noisy. And I remember that David was really good. He pulled out some hats from Stevenson Floor Covering here in Shreveport, a company, some baseball hats, and gave them out. And I think that kind of broke the ice, I guess you would say. And then we started sharing pictures of family pictures, and that made a difference too. And so even though we couldn't, not everybody spoke good English, and certainly we didn't speak any Russian at that time. But we were able to communicate by sharing pictures and hand signs and things like that in David's baseball hats.
One of the Russian officers and the people that were in this passenger bay with us were officers in the flight crew, and they had 2 flight crews, and they were in a separate part of the plane. So the gentlemen that we were with were not part of the actual flying of the plane, but they were officers and carried high rank. And as mentioned, we couldn't talk because of the noise and also because of the different language. But one of them came over and tapped me on the shoulder and wanted me to come over to where they were, and they were eating a snack. So they were going to give me some of their food, and I can remember distinctly what it was. There was a can, and there was some kind of fish with it, and I think salmon, and they had an onion that they just sliced, and some very dark bread. That's not really what I think about is most appetizing, but I said, I'm here on the trip. They've offered it. And so I ate it. And
the onion?
Yes.
That was good.
Raw onion.
That was good.
And they were sharing the food that they had with us.
So that was our first attempt at international relations.
Is it a bed?
That's where we slept, on those benches.
Oh, that's narrow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I think that's James sitting down.
Yes.
And I think I'm standing up.
Yes.
I think I'm wearing one of the hats that one of the local companies sent over.
Larry was probably asleep in the back.
Oh, yes, right. You took the picture.
So that's a hat. I remember when you landed, you were giving away those baseball hats, and people were so eager to get those. So you gave them to the pilots, right?
Everybody that I crossed paths with, I gave them my hat.
Okay, so then this is one of the things that you were for so many hours with people you never knew who did not speak your language, plus you did not hear them, even if you could speak the same language. So how did you communicate besides the baseball, hat sharing and eating the raw onion? to develop a friendship that you developed.
Like I said earlier, pictures were always good. Family pictures.
Family pictures, good. So just kind of pointing.
Yeah. Even when we were in Russia, when we were distributing the food, wherever we were, we could show pictures of our family, and that helped break the ice.
One of the officers spoke some English, so he would serve as our interpreter when we were in an environment other than that airplane. That if somebody asked something in Russia, he would translate and then translate back for us. So I think his name was Vladimir. When we left Alaska and we landed at this remote Russian Air Force base just north of the Chinese border, we were like 100 miles inland from the Pacific Ocean. And it was a military base that we landed. And that was scary in itself.
It was.
We got off of the big bus, and it wasn't an Air Force base. It was just 2 runways. Mm-hmm. And we stood there, and our friends were taken in a vehicle, and they disappeared. So we no longer had an interpreter. And a transport bus or vehicle came along and started dropping young soldiers surrounding the plane, and they each had guns. So we didn't know what was going to happen. It didn't look very friendly to us, and I was in a time of prayer at that time, not knowing exactly what was going to happen.
And like has been mentioned before, we had 80 tons of food, which is so valuable in the medical supplies. Yeah. And so we'd heard a lot about the black market in Russia at that time. And of course, the 3 of us were no defense if somebody had wanted to come and take all that. And so
we were supposed to fly over the North Pole directly to Yekaterinburg. So this leg of our trip, nobody knew where we were. We had lost communications with everybody. Mm-hmm. But after a little while, a Jeep came and picked us up and took us to the Air Force base. And that last picture was us being served supper with the base commander. So they had our friends that we had met on the plane, plus the base commander and some of the base officers. And they really had a big banquet for us.
They really did. And it was late at night, I think. It was like 11 or 11:30 at night, as I remember, p.m.
All the lights were out.
Yeah. And so we were actually, Larry was across the hall from David and me, and there was a knock on the door about 11 o'clock, and I looked at David and I said, well, this is it. They've come to take us away. They got all the medical supplies and the food, and
they don't need us anymore.
They don't need us anymore. And they took us down the hall, and they had like a banquet, and they were so nice to us, and they wanted to know about our families, our jobs, what we do for a living, and we shared everything about ourselves, and they showed us their pictures as well. And it was just a wonderful time of fellowship. And they said, I think one of them said, one of the traditions after a long flight is you gather together and have a meal and have fellowship. Those were wonderful words for us to hear.
Had a toast. They had happened to have some vodka with us. And so they had a toast, and after we had each talked, one of the surprising things that happened, the highest ranking officer made a toast, and he made it to the toast to the God of the entire universe.
Oh, wow.
At that time, I thought that these all would be atheists, and for him to declare a supreme being was really eye-opening to us and very impressive. And they were impressed with us. They thought that maybe we were officers as well.
I thought we were astronauts.
Yeah.
Yes.
And wondered why in the world would we do this. And so we were able to tell them that it was our church, our ministers, and our bishops that were doing this as an act of kindness.
Thank you. And that's a great story. And it tells something I never heard. I knew that on our side, we knew that you were lost. We've been so worried. But we knew also that you fly through the North Pole straight to Yekaterinburg. And that's why, of course, we suspected all this, machinations of KGB and and CIA. And so to see you alive coming down the steps, that was something like a gift from God. But the story that you just told, I think will help our audience to understand that Russian people are very spiritual. And even like military commanders and officers, even when they claimed they're atheists back then, they had to, but deep inside and maybe back home they had icons, they maybe said prayer. Do you remember his rank?
I think colonels.
Colonel, yeah, it's equivalent to the U.S. colonel.
That's quite a touching story to me. Thank you so much. And your way to describe Russian people and how you were afraid, especially when somebody knocked at your door in the night. Honestly, it could happen. It could happen that the whole plane could be kidnapped and everything taken. But I think because it was an effort of both sides, and they were tracking the plane. And it's I think this is the only military cargo airplane that ever fulfilled a mission like that.
When we left Alaska to fly, they said, well, you don't have enough fuel to make it all the way. That's why we stopped in north of the border with China, because we're out of fuel. And they said,
okay,
we don't know when any more fuel is coming.
Oh, wow. But so then tells me, where's this place?
North of the border between China and Russia.
Oh,
far from the Great Wall of China, I believe.
So this is on the Russian territory, correct?
Right.
Correct.
While we were there at this banquet, they brought out the female chef, the cook, that had prepared the food, and they said she had something special for us, because this was at our Easter time. It was close to Easter, and she had something special for us. And she brought out some hard-boiled eggs, his Easter eggs. And she did that specifically because she knew that we were Christians, and that was part of our Christian tradition. And so people had told me to bring little things with you to reciprocate for a gift. And so I had some hand lotion and shampoo, and I presented it to her, and she broke down in tears. These were commodities that she did not have. And I had little chocolate bars that I gave her, and she was just overwhelmed that she had never received anything like that. And that was really special for her.
And that, again, this illustrates how scarce our life was. People were happy to receive the tiniest thing, and especially when it was presented with so much love and care. You're just such nice guys. I remember when you came, everybody just wanted a piece of you. I'm glad we did not tear you apart.
But we had no idea.
We didn't know what was going to happen.
It was just completely unbelievable for us. And that conditions were the way that they were in Russia. We felt like their economy and their society was equivalent to ours, and so it was really eye-opening to us.
Yeah, that's what, through the media at the time, that's what we've been led to believe. And so we did not know anything else until we got there.
I remember how your next visit was, but it was September of 1992. After the mission was completed. So I believe it was like over 20 people who came. And I remember Gay Craner whispered in my ear, she said, oh, Russian women are dressed so well. And we were told by Dwight not to overdress for not humiliating you. And I said, well, I was kind of, I didn't know how to take it. And I said, well, to be honest with you, we always maybe we have one piece, but we will put it on because we want to be presentable, and we are very prideful people. That was an interesting thing too. So coming back to the airplane, I want to show this picture with lots of military guys that you just said, and I'm sure that one of them was that gentleman, that colonel who said that prayer, actually, thank God of the universe, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Those were the colonels that flew in the back with us.
And in the top part of the airplane section where the transport area was above the cargo bay, those were the men that we were with, and I couldn't tell you which one was which.
I like this picture of you.
Flying the plane.
Larry is so excited to be a pilot. I just admire what you've done. I think it was such God's gift for you and for us to be in that mission together. Such a mercy, first of all, that you arrived safely and landed, and also to see how Barksdale base soldiers will load in that plane. And maybe next time we can talk more about that, because I truly want you guys to be back in the studio to talk more about it. And then a reverse situation back in Yekaterinburg. Remember how Russian soldiers were unloading that cargo, and just to see military personnel on both sides working on the same mission with you, I think that's what is so powerful.
It was amazing, and it was powerful to see how well organized it was from both sides in working together when before they hadn't been working together. But it was also well organized. I remember seeing that convoy of trucks coming to unload off of the plane and then take the food boxes to the eye hospital or wherever they were going to be stored. It was amazing.
So we remember that when we started today, you talked about how the idea was to deliver it directly to people who needed food. Because it's not a secret that at that time we had mafia, we had very wealthy people. So we did not want this particular gift of American people to end on the black market or in the homes of people who have enough already. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I appreciated, that we had a special like a list from the city council of names with names of people who truly were absolutely hungry. And so the stories were so not just inspiring, but really heartbreaking.
Have you ever seen someone cry when they got a 5-pound bag of sugar? Food on board that Russian cargo plane was given out last week to Yekaterinburg's oldest and poorest. Their reactions to the sugar, dehydrated soup, and powdered milk were heart-wrenching. As members of the Yekaterinburg Methodist Church explained to this woman how to use the food she was getting, she began crying. Thank you, she says, and breaks down. That scene was to be repeated throughout a very long day. Many, if not most, of the Russians who got food boxes had never received any help before. This food was unexpected and needed. This elderly woman was helped to stand up so she could thank the only American in the room, the photographer.
God bless you.
Spasiba, thank you, she says. And thanks to all Americans for helping us in World War II. Crews from the church visited some sad places. This woman lives in a one-room apartment with her 18-year-old invalid daughter. Listen to her daughter's reaction to a chocolate bar. One by one, the cooking oil and pasta, rice, soup, and sugar are pulled out of the box until it becomes too much for the mother to bear. And in another case, a woman looks at the tea and flour, but cradles the sugar in her lap, afraid almost to let it go.
Could you say a little more? Because you did not just act like you're astronauts and you flew over the North Pole, but you also actually physically visited some of the families and you brought those boxes. Could you share that experience?
I remember it seemed like everybody lived on the top floor. Did it seem that way to you, David? It seemed like
no elevators, all stairs.
Anyway, we would walk up to the response. I would tell you the response was the same whenever we went to and started taking the items out of the boxes. Whoever it was, they would break down with emotion and tears and thanks. And one lady, I remember, thanked me on behalf of what the United States had done in World War II. I will never forget that. Do you remember that, lady?
I do. That she said that the U.S. military had delivered food, and she remembered that, and they were so appreciative, and they were emotional, and they would give you big hugs. And again, to be able to deliver an individual box directly to the people that were recipients was a very spiritual thing for me.
And me too. And I'll never forget those moments when we took the items out of the food boxes, and then, like we said before, we read the greeting, that where it had come from and what church it had come from, and the names of who had prepared it. I will never forget those moments that we had during those days. It was special.
Some of the medical personnel we saw there, and David's with him.
Unpacking some of the medical equipment and medical devices.
See that, yes, it is like Larry's here and David, and those machines were so much needed. I believe it may be ultrasound equipment. Do you remember what was that?
That is a balloon pump. It's used in heart surgery.
Larry, do you remember how important it was for us? Because you went to that diagnostic center, and you, David, and I'm sure James too, how important it was for the doctors to meet you, because for them, you are very highly reputable cardiac surgeon, as I understand, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
With the cardiac surgery team in Yekaterinburg at their hospital, and it was impressive. They did a lot of valve surgery. They didn't do bypasses, which is what we mostly did, and because they didn't have a cath lab to study the vessel.
So, but did you participate in any surgery?
No.
Just simply, yeah.
Yeah.
And David, you're connected to the hospital here, right? At that time.
Yes, I was part of the maintenance and engineering that goes along with the hospital facility. And I was just tagging along with Larry, but I was able to share with them that my mother, who was 72 at the time, had just gotten double bypass surgery before I left to go on the flight. I was concerned about her health and even wondered if I should leave the States. But she was up and walking around the neighborhood within 2 weeks of her surgery, and they were amazed to hear how successful that was, and that somebody my mother's age would be a candidate for surgery in the first place.
Absolutely, and that's at that time we did not have that level of cardiac surgeries, and that's why you both came, and that equipment and Larry's experience. It was just like, again, it's like sort of being astronauts, but in a medical field. It's important, and then also the vision of connecting professionals on different levels. I want to show a few slides that, Larry, thank you so much for sending me, that illustrate how you mentioned, James, that we had lists of people who needed food. This is what shows how our church members and you followed those lists from the city council. Right. And also here, if you see the following slides, this is when you went actually into the neighborhood, remember?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, and there was an organized list of who would receive the food boxes. And, this group would be first, this group would be second, and so forth.
Do you remember that lady?
I think is this the lady that thanked us for World War II, or was it another lady?
We had several. So I have stories about veterans of the World War II who were receiving humanitarian aid. But this one, I'm not sure. But what do you think, David? I think it's you there bringing the box.
Right. David carried the boxes, and I videoed him.
So this was an example of the person receiving the food, and I couldn't recall if this is the one that related from previous history where U.S. soldiers brought food. But this was typical of the distribution. Again, every last one of them were so appreciative. And again, this was kind of eye-opening to me, and I could see why that would be such a gift. And as you explained, some of the items that were in the box included sugar and other things. And so this were going to be a great benefit to the individuals that got the food.
I remember one older lady we visited, she was practically 90. And when she opened the door and we said that we brought food, she actually says, no, I don't need any food. And we were amused. And we could see how empty her apartment was. And we said, but it is for you. And remember how heavy the boxes were? You mentioned the no elevators, 50 pounds. And so she said, I'm about to die anyway. Give it to somebody else.
They were needing the food that they were willing to share it or to give it to somebody else.
Yes. And then when we finally convinced her and we entered the apartment and we placed that box on the table and started taking the food out, flour, sugar, candy, she suddenly did that and she said, oh my, now I can live for another 3 years. You don't know what should you cry or laugh, but it's just so much love that you brought with that airplane, guys. And I hope you can feel at least a little pride or gratitude to God that you happen to be a part of that amazing mission. So God brought us together. Please know that we are always so proud of you. That's why I wanted to invite you. And we will have questions and answers event. We invite you all to follow us. It will be on the Facebook via Zoom, and our dear friends James and Larry and David will participate in that because there are lots of secrets in that story, and we are willing to answer your questions. So please stay with us, follow us, and join us via Zoom on that day of questions and answers. God bless you, and I'm sure that we will have you back in the studio, guys, because we just want to hear your voices, to see your pictures. Thank you very much. Thank you. Do you want to say anything in the end to our viewers?
Our trip, our mission to Russia was a blessing to us. We went to be a blessing to other people, but we were the ones that were blessed.
Thank you, because that makes me cry. I love you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you later.
Okay.
Looking forward. Bye.